Hello, everybody. Let us now talk about books 3 and 4 of The Dark Knight Returns. While some new themes emerge and deserve our attention, we can also learn a lot about those themes and ideas that started in the first two books that continue to expand and develop in these ones. One of those themes is the media's coverage of Batman's and Gotham's actions. A great place to look at this is the end of Book 3 and the beginning of Book 4. In fact, Joker knows Batman's biggest vulnerability is in the arena of public perception, and that's where Joker's final attack occurs. In committing suicide in the way he does, he frames Batman, adding murder to the charges against him. And we see that through the news, where the TV is calling him a murderer on air for all to see. Interestingly, just before it does so, at the beginning of Book 4, the media message is mixed, portraying him as in pursuit of Joker and perhaps heroic. But on his tail is the quote-unquote real law enforcement of Gotham. The police also sort of frame Batman too. On page 159, Batman is coaxed into fighting the police, but then, due to coverage, is driven further underground for, you guessed it, fighting the police. All told, Batman is not good at manipulating the press. Perhaps because, unlike many of the politicians in Gotham, Batman is not interested in how he is covered on TV. Another theme has to do with worldwide geopolitics, proxy wars, and its analogy in the real world, the Cold War. And along with that, the idea of the U.S. doing both good and bad in the world. They prevent nuclear disaster while also perpetuating conflict in faraway places. The war in Corto Maltese has its analogies in Korea, Vietnam, Cuba, and more concurrently, with the writing of this comic, the Russian war with Afghanistan, where it has been said that the US and the USSR were fighting wars of influence throughout the world. The difference here, of course, is that there is a superhero involved. Superman seems to be single-handedly fighting the war, akin to a CIA secret weapon. Now on to another theme. There's this theme of reflection, or of the mirror image. If we refer back to Two-Face and think about the line that ends Book 1, that when Batman looks at Two-Face, he says he sees a reflection, we are reminded of a theme that emerges throughout these last two books. Check out this panel, in which the Joker attempts to shoot Batman in a hall of mirrors, but instead shoots his reflection in the head. The Hall of Mirrors itself, of course, rises to the level of symbol. But later, also, we see Batman and Joker side by side, one injured from a gunshot wound and the other about to kill himself in order to frame Batman. Next to each other, lying there, one a masked vigilante and the other a nihilist clown, we perhaps see that they are more similar than Batman would like to admit. The same might be said about Batman and the sons of Batman. While Batman ultimately draws them under his power and harnesses their youthful energy for his own ends, convincing them to stop using guns and thus teaching them to fight crime using an ethical code that eliminates murder from their repertoire of crime-fighting tools, they start out doing basically the same thing as Batman, just by more violent and draconian means, like cutting shoplifters' hands off. And then the sons of Batman, at those earlier points, also resemble the mutants in their rhetoric. Indeed, their statements on TV directly mirror those of the mutants in the first two books, drawing a parallel between the masses of underground heroes and villains that reflects that of the individual hero-villain connection that Batman and Gotham as a whole seem to wrestle with. The most important mirror image is perhaps between Superman and Batman. As a side note, it's also reflected between Catwoman, who we see dressed up as Wonder Woman. These men are using their significant powers for different means. Superman represents and helps the state. On one level, he's an insufferable do-gooder, a supplicant to the president, whereas Batman plays by his own rules. It must be said, though, that Superman does this as a kind of compromise. It's his answer to the question of public perception. And in an astonishing series of pages in Book 4, we get each of these superheroes wielding their power in the fashion that their unique style allows. Batman, of course, is only human, and therefore in some ways is weak in comparison to Superman. But being human has its advantages. Superman represents state power, whereas Batman represents the individual. And we see them both helping humanity, aka being superheroes, on the levels that they are able. With all of humanity at stake, Superman stops a nuclear warhead in its tracks. This is where his game is played, in the sky, against weapons of unimaginable strength. With all of Gotham at stake and in total mayhem, Batman brings the mass of humanity on the street into order. He protects the vulnerable and creates a unique form of justice by forming a makeshift militia. This is where Batman's game is played, on the ground, against the worst impulses of individual humans. Also, there's the themes of aging. Book 3 puts this front and center right away. Batman's dressed as an old woman at its beginning and an elderly man at the end. The idea may be that he doesn't need to disguise himself very much to go undercover as these people, and perhaps he's closer in age to them than to Gotham's young. And in basically every fight Batman gets into, he's reminded that he's slower than he used to be, and his enemies apparently are not. He wins here not by speed and agility, but by wisdom and careful planning. Along with that, he gets significant help from others, including Robin, of course, whom he openly compares himself to in terms of the number of years they have left, but also significantly Green Arrow, who shoots the kryptonite arrow that allows him to escape Superman, however briefly. He needs this help more than ever, because he has aged. Right alongside aging are the ideas of reckoning with the past and of dealing with past trauma. We saw these themes set up in the first two books pretty heavily. Some crucial panels in books 3 and 4 address this, as we see Batman reliving his parents' death with every death that the Joker hands out, which numbers are astronomical. We also see Batman address bats themselves directly in book 4, trying to come to peace with them, and thus also attempting to lay aside once and for all the trauma of seeing his parents killed, and therefore the persona of Batman. He does this directly in his fight with Superman. He chooses to revisit the location of his parents' death to fake his own death. He also collapses Wayne Manor into the Batcave. And our conclusion shows us that he realizes he must put the Batman persona to rest in order to keep doing good. He follows Green Arrow's advice in this regard. And of course, the ultimate questions of basically every Batman comic, book, and film. What is justice? Who gets to decide what is just? And how is justice enacted? This is at the center of almost every threat Batman faces. Yindel and the police force's attacks, the Sons of Batman in Book 3, the Joker, the media, the President, and Superman. They all have competing ideas about what is just, what is the right thing to do, and who divvies out the punishments for those who do wrong. And this is the main ethical dilemma in Batman. I wonder, though, how we think Batman's ideas of justice have evolved. Or are they the only constant in a world and a human being that is ever changing? For we see Batman not only getting older, but noticing the changes in his body, accepting those things he can't change, realizing that Batman has to die in order for him to continue his mission, and therefore giving up his former existence completely, burning it to the ground, ultimately, and this time, perhaps for good. But he still sticks to the idea that he can do good in the world, but he must do it quietly, in ways less spectacular. He needs to be an invisible force fighting against evil. He must retire the symbol, but maintain the ideals in order to fight another day.